We have a Super Bowl matchup. We're fired up about it. Greg Cosell of NFL Films is here with us to break it down for another episode of The Install. Buddy, how we living on this Wednesday?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. It's nice the season's winding down. Believe it or not, Buck, I've started watching college tape. So we're making that transition slowly but surely.
Teams have already done so as well down at the Senior Bowl this week.
Yeah.
And this is the first Senior Bowl I've missed in a little while. I've never had FOMO about Mobile, Alabama until this week, Greg. And now I wish that I was down there eating oysters with Coach Mack. But what are you going to do?
Well, Coach Mack, we know he's there, and we know he's probably now the mayor of Mobile as well. We know he's the mayor of Nashville, but now he's probably the mayor of Mobile as well.
Coach Mack is the mayor of any given setting that he's in. It's the
That is
beauty of
correct. That is correct.
It's the beauty of Coach Mack's charm. But we're not here to talk about the charms of Coach Mack. We're here to break down championship weekend, as it were. Of course, the Chiefs and the Niners will advance, a rematch from a couple of years ago, if not with a couple of different parts. But Greg, let's start with the AFC game. Didn't play out the way that I think many of the pundits had anticipated. Certainly the over didn't hit for our gambling friends at home. But this was a fascinating game for a variety of different reasons. I want to start with Baltimore and the way that their season ended, because the offensive approach for the Ravens is the thing that has most been scrutinized. Now, you and I don't cherry pick coaches that way around here, because there's a lot of different information that we don't have. But I would like to get your initial thoughts on the way that the Ravens approached this Chiefs defense and the lack of volume that there was with their running game.
Yeah, and it's funny because watching the game both on TV and then when I watched the tape, I didn't feel that watching it. I wasn't watching the game going, oh, they're not handing the ball to Hill. They're not handing the ball to Edwards. And I didn't feel that. Maybe others did. But the thing that probably struck me the most when I watched the tape, and again, only they can tell you why, and I'm sure that people are obviously saying their game plan was poor and the play calling. You know how all that goes. But this was a team that throughout this season, they don't play a high percentage out of what we call 11 personnel, meaning one back, one tight end, and three wide receivers. In fact, they were near the bottom of the NFL in percentage of snaps played out of 11 personnel. Well, in this game, and of course, this game was never really out of hand. In this game, they played 63% of their snaps in 11 personnel. And 34 of Jackson's 46 dropbacks came out of 11 personnel. So the coaching staff clearly felt that was the best way to play this game. Now, I'm one who tends to believe that coaches who spend 15, 16 hours a day doing this kind of work know more than I do about the specifics. It's always easy when something doesn't work to say it's wrong. Obviously, that's the way it played out. That is inarguable. The result tells you that, hey, maybe that wasn't the right approach, but they clearly thought it was, and it didn't work. So, these are the situations, and I sit with my guys here in the matchup room and think to myself, God, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when the coaching staff met early in the week and decided what their approach was going to be. I would have loved to have known what the process was, because I'm a process guy. The results are the results. It's easy to talk about something good or bad once you have the results. To me, I like the process more, and I'd love to know what the thought process was.
Right, and of course, only John Harbaugh and Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, there can give us that level of detail.
And they're not going to. Right.
So, here we are left to discern as much as you can off of tape and try not to make too many inferences, I guess. But I guess it's more interesting with them, Greg, because of what you just outlined, because it looked so much different from basically what got the Ravens there, right? They have a very physical style of play. It's predicated off their ability to run the football. They do it out of heavy personnel sets a lot of times. And this is as much of Lamar in a drop back passing game under Todd Monken as we've seen at any point in his career. So I wonder if there's something about the Chiefs defense, not to infer too much, but if there was something about the Chiefs defense that might have lent Todd Monken to making that decision.
And again, it's also possible that they didn't go into the game with that specific decision, but what they saw from the defense said, you know what? I don't think that we're going to run the ball real well, because one thing we saw from the Chiefs, and we didn't see it on every snap, nothing is 100%, as you know, Buck, but the Chiefs ran a lot of 5-man fronts, and they were at times reduced. And what I mean by reduced is you had a player lined up over the center, a defensive lineman lined up over the offensive center, and the defensive tackles, and they could have been ends, but they were reduced further inside, meaning that they were lined up usually just off the outside shoulder of the guards. So it's very hard to run inside with those 3 defenders so tight. That's what reduced means. And that was a game plan foundation for the Chiefs out of both base and nickel. And they did that, a number of times. So again, I don't know if that's the reason. I'm just speculating based on what I saw on film. But it's very possible that they felt, seeing that front, that the inside run game with Edwards, for instance, was not really going to be a good way to attack the defense.
Well, and it was certainly fair to expect that the Chiefs would adjust, right, Greg? Because they're coming off a game against the Buffalo Bills where Buffalo was able to run the football with a fair amount of success against them. And certainly Steve Spagnuolo is no fool to know that the Ravens were going to come in, be able to run the ball to a certain extent, and understand, take whatever lessons they could from the Bills game and try to apply it to the sensibilities of the team that they were getting ready to face in the AFC Championship game.
I mean, I certainly thought, and again, I'm not saying this, because I don't do that. I mean, I'm not saying this as a knock on Todd Monken. He certainly has more information than you or I and the staff when they're game planning. But I would have expected, because I spoke about this last week in a number of different venues, I thought you would have seen more Lamar Jackson design runs, because I would have thought that, the Chiefs are an aggressive defense. You want to try to sort of minimize their aggression. And when the quarterback, who's, the most dynamic runner in the league, runs the ball, it does minimize your aggression, because all of a sudden the concept, which we hear all the time, of assignment football comes into play much more, because you can't just attack. You have to be in position to play your assignment and defend that. And they obviously chose not to do that. So again, because of the result, it's very easy to second guess what they did. But, obviously it did not work. They were not able to really generate much with the pass game either. But it became, I think there were 46 dropbacks by Lamar. I don't know if that's the most he had all season. It would strike me that it may well have been, but when all said and done, they ended up with 46 dropbacks in a game that was never really out of hand.
Well, you bring up the design runs, and it makes me think about the idea, Greg, and I don't have percentages handy for the audience, but just kind of like trying to understand more about the process, right? Lamar, with this Todd Monken offense,
right,
felt like, to me, less that he was taking off and running, that he was, there was an emphasis, obviously, of him playing within the structure of the offense. And I don't know what percentage of quarterback designed runs that they called this year versus what they did under Greg Roman. Don't have those numbers handy to me, but just so we can understand more about what the Ravens and Todd Monken might be with Lamar Jackson moving forward, how much of that kind of is who they've been all year long within this system.
You talking about how they played this particular game?
Yeah, not the rate of how much he's dropping back, right? As you mentioned, 46, 47 times. That's probably as high,
and it is
as close to as high a number of dropbacks as Lamar has had in a game. But that does seem like there has been an emphasis on Lamar operating within that structure and not just taking off and freewheeling as often as we've seen him do, which is one of the things that makes him special. But also, you're getting a better version of Lamar Jackson, the quarterback, this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we did see that this year. I think that he improved in that area. I did speak to a coach yesterday who, still felt that if you make Lamar become more of a true drop back passer, that he's still not quite what you want, but again, that's open to debate. That's a coach that, I'm not saying that, but that's a coach who's an offensive coach in this league and has been for a very long time. So, maybe there is still a feeling from people in the league and therefore defensive coaches as well, that if indeed, he becomes a true drop back quarterback, that's not the best way to deploy his skill set. By the way, I did look up while we're speaking, that was the most dropbacks he had in any game this season. It was only the second time all season he dropped back more than 40 times in a given game. Now, the other time he did, they beat the Rams 37-31. So they put up 37 points in that game.
We'll talk more about the Chiefs. I mean, we'll talk obviously about the Chiefs here, but more about the Chiefs next week as we preview the Super Bowl next week. But the way that the Ravens defense played throughout the course of this game, because as you said, it was never out of hand. It was 17-10. The Ravens had a variety of different miscues, penalties, turnovers that were less characteristic from what we've seen from them throughout the course of the regular season that did themselves no favors. But Greg, the way that Mike Macdonald's defense performed, and we mentioned Mike Macdonald on the day that he officially gets the Seattle Seahawks head coaching job, that defense, how they put it together, how well that defense executed all throughout the course of the season, including in this AFC Championship game. If you're Seattle, you have to be looking at playing the Niners and the Rams twice a year, looking at Mike Macdonald's defense, knowing the success that he had against those two offenses even this season, and saying, all right, if we can't get another offense to go, blow for blow with Seattle, with LA and San Francisco, at least we've got the guy that knows how to stop them.
Yeah, and I thought they did a good job. Keep in mind that in the second half of the game, the Chiefs offense did not move the ball with any kind of consistency or meaningful production. They gained 98 total yards in the second half, and we know 32 of them came on that last play to Valdez-Scantling. So basically, until that play, they gained 66 yards in the second half. So I would say that this was one of the few games in which Mahomes and the passing game did not have much success versus pressure at all. Now, the Ravens did not pressure a high percentage, but they were certainly able to disrupt the Chiefs passing game when they did. And throughout Mahomes' career, he and that offense have been phenomenal versus pressure. Phenomenal. In fact, people say don't pressure them, but in this game, they were not.
As we look at the NFC side of the bracket, the Lions go home, the 49ers advance. It was a dramatic situation in which the Lions saw their season ending. And ultimately, Greg, like the game previous, it comes down to execution, because the plays were there to be made. It's just the players didn't necessarily make them as often as Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson would have liked for them to. What you saw, Ben Johnson, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is going back to Detroit to be their offensive coordinator for another year. He took himself out of the running for the Commanders job, which, as we sit here recording the podcast on Wednesday afternoon, is the only head coaching vacancy still available. That offense and what they've been able to accomplish, how they've played to their players' strengths, that was still very much the case in the first half of that game. You had the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble. You had the Josh Reynolds drops in the middle of that, and Dan Campbell's, we're not going to do the coach second guessing thing around here, but Dan Campbell's decisions are also a part of the discussion here as to what saw them impact this game. From the game plan standpoint, though, Greg, what did you like about the way that the Lions went about attacking the Niners before we turn to how the Niners turned it back on?
Well, it was pretty clear that they felt that they could run the football, and they've been a strong running team all season, as well as they've thrown it. They're still, and again, balance is one of those relative terms, and who knows how they or any team defines balance, but they do run the ball well. They have all season, and I think that they felt that they could do that. Don't forget, the Niners defense has not been really that strong over the last month or so. They've struggled against the run, which is kind of surprising given the quality of individual talent they have in their front group. And they certainly are not a great pass defense. They've not been able to rush the quarterback the way that you would expect, again, given the talent level of their defensive line. And they did come out and they ran the ball. And when you watch that tape through the first two possessions or so, they were moving the 49ers D line, particularly the interior. Hargrave got moved quite a bit. I mean, the entire interior, whoever they had playing D tackle, they were getting moved. And when you get moved by double teams and you get driven back into the lap of linebackers. And that limits what Warner, the best linebacker in the league, and Greenlaw, a very good linebacker, can do, because all of a sudden you've got your own defensive tackle right in your lap, and it's hard for you to move freely. And that happened quite a bit. And then, of course, there's the play action pass game. Goff is maybe the best in the league executing the under center play action pass game. And they moved the ball pretty efficiently in the first half. I mean, I don't know about you, Buck, but when it was 24-7 at halftime, I wasn't feeling real good about the Niners' ability to come back because they were being physically handled.
Yeah. And that's not something that we're accustomed to seeing from San Francisco. And,
no.
That front, I don't want to say that it's underperformed all year long, but I think it has fallen short of what our expectations are relative to the talent that they've got, Greg.
I would agree. I would agree with that.
So with that, San Francisco mounts the comeback. I think it's 27 unanswered points throughout the course of that game. Purdy just continues to find ways to execute within the scope of that offense. We know how much easier it is for him when Deebo Samuel is a part of their offensive game plan, but between what they have in Ayuk, Deebo, Kittle, and their run game, finding ways to win, it makes them a threat at any given point. I'm fascinated to see, and obviously we'll talk more about the matchup between the Niners and the Chiefs next week, but I'm just so fascinated to see how Purdy again meets the moment, because he certainly did on Sunday against the Lions.
Yeah, although I would argue, and I guarantee that Kyle Shanahan has been working on this, and he may not be thrilled, but I don't think Purdy in the two playoff games has played particularly well. I mean, obviously he made some plays with his legs in the second half of this last game, the NFC Championship, but he is missing a lot of throws in terms of just not turning it loose, not seeing it the right way. Throws that are there, throws that he's looking at, and for whatever reason doesn't turn it loose. And I know that that's not sitting well with Kyle Shanahan. So he's going to have to do a better job in this Super Bowl. He can't leave those throws on the field. Now, he obviously made some special plays with his legs, and probably nobody really expected that, although he's not a bad athlete at all. But he made a number of them. One of them was on one where he should have absolutely thrown a ball to a wide open receiver who he looked right at and just didn't throw it. But, obviously they won the game, and you know how that goes. When you win the game, then the quarterback does what it takes to win. That's what people say. But I think he's going, and we'll get into this more next week, but he's going to have to play better in the Super Bowl against a very difficult defense to play against.
Nobody is more keenly aware of that, as you said, than Kyle Shanahan, who has seen a quarterback miss just, it only takes one or two throws in a Super Bowl, Greg. The margin for error is just so thin, and Kyle Shanahan, having lived that.
That. I mean, Garoppolo missed two in particular. That one I know probably bothers Shanahan to this day. I mean, obviously he overthrew Sanders, which would have been a touchdown and maybe won the game for them. That is a little different. That's just an overthrow. You got to make it. But the one that probably bothers him more than anything was a play a little earlier where he missed the proper read, and it would have been a big conversion and I don't remember every detail, but I remember this because I remember having a great conversation at an event with Mike McDaniel about it, because Mike McDaniel was on the 49ers staff at the time. And those are the things that bother Kyle more than anything, when you design it and your quarterback doesn't throw it.
Lack of execution. It's not something that you want at this stage of the game. When we come back next week, we'll be talking Super Bowl. I'm excited. Greg is going to be out in Las Vegas. We'll make sure you have your episode in hand before my man gets on a plane to go hang out with everybody else, including 3HL, who I know is excited to go. God knows what Ron Slay is going to do in Las Vegas, Greg. Stay clear. Stay clear. All right.
Well,
I need to make sure we have a podcast next week.
I'm going to be staying clear of Ron Slay, whatever activity he's doing.
God knows there will be plenty of activities going on. Greg, I always appreciate your insight. We look forward to doing it again next week, my friend.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.